I was sitting at my kitchen table, holding a brochure for an Alaskan cruise and smiling at my husband, Frank, when the phone rang. It was an unknown number, but a sinking feeling in my gut told me I had to answer. On the other end, a brisk, impatient voice asked if I was Peggy Butler. I confirmed it, my hand tightening around my coffee mug. The woman from the lending agency informed me that my account was flagged for repossession and that I had a missed payment on a $68,000 Cadillac Escalade. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. I haven't bought a car in 7 years. I drive a paid-off Honda. My hands began to shake so badly, I almost dropped the phone. The agent continued, explaining that the loan was 30 days delinquent, and if I didn't pay $1,200 immediately, they would send a tow truck. My voice barely came out when I whispered that there must be a mistake, that I had never stepped foot in their dealership. She replied in a cold, matter-of-fact tone that the paperwork was solid, my Social Security number was on the file, and the contract had been signed digitally via email. I looked across the table at Frank, who was watching the color drain from my face. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that our peaceful retirement was over. But let me tell you how we got here. Because this story didn't start on that Saturday afternoon. This story started 3 weeks earlier, back when I still believed my son was an honest man. Back before a phone call on a quiet Tuesday morning changed everything. There is a specific kind of peace you earn after 45 years of working, raising children, and paying taxes. It's the peace of a quiet Tuesday morning. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, hitting the table where my husband, Frank, and I had our papers spread out. We weren't worrying about bills for once. We were looking at glaciers. I think the balcony suite is worth the extra money, Peggy, Frank said, tapping a picture in the Alaska cruise brochure. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes crinkling at the corners. We've saved for it. We're not getting any younger, and I don't want to be staring at the ocean through a porthole the size of a dinner plate. I smiled at him. At 70, Frank was still the handsome man I married, though his hair was fully white now. We had been talking about this trip for 5 years. It was our bucket list item, our reward for being sensible. We are the kind of people who drive our cars until the wheels fall off. My Honda CR-V is 7 years old, and Frank's truck is pushing 12. We don't do debt. We don't do flashy. We protect our nest egg because on a fixed income, one bad surprise can ruin everything. That bad surprise rang the phone at 10:15 a.m. I almost didn't answer it. The caller ID just said, Auto Finance Services. We get so many scam calls these days, people trying to sell us extended warranties or fake medical braces. But something in my gut, maybe a mother's intuition or just bad luck, made me pick up the receiver. Hello, I said, keeping my voice sharp. I was ready to hang up. Good morning. I am attempting to reach a Mrs. Peggy Butler, a woman's voice said. It wasn't a robot. It was a real person, and she sounded brisk, professional, and impatient. Speaking, I said, Frank looked up from the brochure, sensing the shift in my tone. Mrs. Butler, this is Sarah from Premier Auto Lenders. I'm calling regarding the past due payment on your account. We haven't received the first installment for the vehicle, and you are now 30 days delinquent. I actually laughed. It was a short, dry chuckle. Honey, you have the wrong number. I haven't bought a car in 7 years. I own my Honda outright. Please take me off your list. I went to hang up, but the woman's voice cut through loud and clear. Mrs. Butler, please do not hang up. This is a serious matter regarding the 2025 Cadillac Escalade financed in your name. The amount outstanding is $1,200. If we don't resolve this today, the account goes to collections. My hand froze halfway to the cradle. A Cadillac Escalade. I knew what those were. They were massive, tank-sized SUVs that cost more than my first house. "Frank," I whispered, covering the mouthpiece. "Pick up the extension." Now, Frank's face went serious. He hurried to the living room and picked up the other line. I took a breath. "I'm still here. Listen to me very carefully. I did not buy a Cadillac. I have never been to your dealership. This is fraud. You need to fix this." "Ma'am, we verified all identity documents at the time of signing," the agent said, sounding annoyed now. "I have your file, right here. Peggy Butler, Social Security ending in 4-5-8-2. My stomach dropped like I was in a free-falling elevator. "That was my number. And your current address is 420 Oak Creek Lane?" she continued. "Yes," I stammered. "That's my house. But I didn't sign anything." Frank spoke up from the other room, his voice deep and shaking with anger. "This is her husband. We are retired. We don't drive luxury SUVs. We don't have that kind of money. Who signed these papers?" The agent paused. I could hear her typing on a keyboard. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard to me. "The contract was executed digitally via DocuSign 3 weeks ago," she said. "It was sent to the email address on file, peggybutler1955@gmail.com. The IP address for the signature matches the location of the vehicle registration." I stared at the phone. My mind was racing, trying to make the pieces fit. "Wait," I said. "My email is peggybutler55@gmail.com. Just the number 55. Not 1955. "Well, that's the email we have," the agent said. And the validation link was clicked from that email account. I felt cold. Someone knew my name. They knew my address. They knew my social security number. And they knew enough about me to create a fake email address that looked almost exactly like mine. Close enough that a bank wouldn't look twice, but different enough that I would never see the notifications. "Where is the car?" Frank asked. His voice was quiet now, the way it gets right before he explodes. "You said the registration address matches the location. Where is the car registered?" "One moment," the agent said. The silence on the line lasted for 10 seconds, but it felt like an hour. I looked out the window at my garden. My hydrangeas were blooming. The sun was still shining, but the peace was gone. Someone had stolen my identity. I was thinking about hackers in Russia, or maybe a clerk at the grocery store who swiped my card info. "The vehicle is registered and garaged at 18 Willow Branch Drive, Portland," the agent read out. The world stopped. I didn't need to write it down. I knew that address. I had driven there for birthdays, for Thanksgiving dinners, for babysitting weekends. I had painted the guest room in that house. I had helped pay for the down payment on that house 10 years ago. I looked across the hallway at Frank. He was standing in the living room doorway, holding the phone away from his ear, his face gray. 18 Willow Branch Drive. That wasn't a stranger's house. That wasn't a hacker in another country. "That's Ronald's house," I whispered. The agent was still talking, asking about payment methods, but I couldn't hear her anymore. My only son. My only child. He hadn't just stolen money from me. He had used my name, my credit, my life's work to buy a luxury car he couldn't afford. And he had done it behind my back while smiling at my face. "Mrs. Butler, are you still there?" the agent asked. "I'm here," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. I need to call you back." I hung up the phone. Frank hung up his. We stood there in the silence of the house that suddenly felt very big and very empty. The brochure for the Alaska cruise was still on the table, looking like a dream from a different life. "It can't be," Frank said, but he knew. We both knew. Ronald had done this. And as the shock began to fade, something else started to take its place. It wasn't just sadness. It was the cold, hard realization that the son we raised had just declared war on us. Frank looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He was standing in the middle of the living room, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles were white. His other hand was shaking, a tremor running all the way up his arm. I had never seen my husband shake before. He was the man who fixed our roof during a storm. He was the man who held me up at my mother's funeral. But this betrayal, coming from his own flesh and blood, had cut the strings that held him together. "I'm calling him," Frank snarled, his voice cracking. He started punching numbers into the keypad with trembling fingers. "I'm going to drive over there and drag him out of that house by his ear. I'm going to—" "No," I shouted. I moved faster than I had in years, crossing the room and pulling the phone from his hand. "Frank, stop. Don't you dare call him." "Peggy, he stole my name. He stole your credit. That car is $68,000. Frank was yelling, but his eyes were wet. "I know," I said, forcing my voice to be steady even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I know, Frank. But think about it. If you call him right now, screaming and yelling, what will he do? He'll lie. He'll say it was a mistake. He'll say he was going to surprise us. Or worse, he'll hide the car. He'll delete emails. He'll cover his tracks." I took a deep breath, looking at my husband. We are not dealing with a stranger. We are dealing with a liar who knows us better than anyone. If we want to fix this, we need to know exactly what he did. We need ammunition, Frank, not noise. Frank stared at me, his chest heaving. Slowly, the fight drained out of him, replaced by a terrifying exhaustion. He nodded and sank onto the sofa. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, Peg, what do we do?" "We go to the computer," I said, "and we look at everything." I led the way to our small home office. Usually, I only go in there to pay the electric bill or print out recipes. I sat down at the desktop and woke it up. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I felt sick. I felt like I was about to snoop through a stranger's diary. But it was my own life I was investigating. "Check the checking account," Frank said, pulling a chair up beside me. "We haven't looked at it since we booked the flights last week." I navigated to our bank's website. My password was saved in the browser, something Ronald had set up for me, because I always forgot it. I clicked login. The screen loaded, and the balance flashed in bold black numbers. I gasped. Frank made a low, pained sound in his throat. The balance wasn't zero, but it was close. We usually kept about $8,000 in there for household expenses and the upcoming property tax bill. Now, it was sitting at just under $2,000. Where did it go? I whispered. $6,000. In 3 weeks? I scrolled down to the transaction history. It wasn't one big theft. It wasn't a single transfer that we could easily dispute. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. $54, Shell Station. $128.50, the liquor barn. $45, Uber Eats. $200, cash withdrawal, ATM. $60, Shell Station. $85, Cinema Complex. The list went on and on. Page after page of scrolling. "Look at the locations." Frank pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "The gas station on Elm Street. The liquor store on 4th. That's 3 blocks from his office. Peggy. And the movie theater," I added, feeling bile rise in my throat. "That's the one near their house. The one with the reclining heated seats. It was intimate. That's what hurt the most. A hacker in Russia doesn't buy snacks at the gas station down the street. A stranger doesn't use your money to order takeout for a Tuesday night dinner. Ronald was living his life, filling his tank, drinking his wine, feeding his family using the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved for decades." "How?" Frank asked. "How did he get access? We have the debit cards in our wallets." I closed my eyes, and suddenly the memory hit me like a physical slap. 2 months ago, I said softly, "Easter Sunday." Frank looked at me. "What? Remember when we went over for Easter?" I brought my iPad to show Connie the photos of the garden. She said the screen was too dim and the font was too small. Ronald took it. He said, "Mom, let me optimize the settings for you. You have too many apps running in the background." I opened my eyes and looked at the computer screen. He sat in the recliner for 30 minutes with my iPad. He knew my passcode because I told him. He must have added our debit card to his digital wallet on his phone. He must have reset the bank password and then set up that fake email address to catch the alerts. He planned it, Frank said. The realization hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He didn't just panic and need money. He sat there, eating our ham, drinking our tea, and stealing our retirement. I clicked on the profile tab of the bank website. Sure enough, the email address on file wasn't mine. It was peggybutler1955@gmail.com. And the phone number for alerts had been changed to a number I didn't recognize, probably a burner phone or an app he used. He locked us out of our own alerts. I said, he made sure we wouldn't hear the alarm bells ringing while he robbed the house. Suddenly, there was a thud. I spun around. Frank had slumped forward in his chair, his hand clutching the left side of his chest. His face, which had been pale, was now flushing a deep, dangerous red. "Frank!" I screamed. I grabbed his shoulders. "Frank, look at me. Breathe." "My chest," he gasped, his eyes squeezed shut. "It feels tight." Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through me. Frank has been on blood pressure medication for 5 years. The doctor told us strictly, avoid stress. Keep him calm. "I'm getting the monitor," I said. I ran to the bathroom cabinet, grabbed the cuff, and ran back. I strapped it onto his arm, my own hands shaking now. I pressed the button. The machine whirred, tightening around his arm, squeezing just like the fear was squeezing my heart. We waited in silence, the only sound the mechanical hiss of the machine deflating. 178/110. "Oh, Frank," I whispered. That was stroke territory. "I'm okay," he wheezed, trying to sit up straight. "Just give me a minute." I went to the kitchen, got him a glass of water and his emergency pill. I made him take it. I rubbed his back, murmuring soft things, telling him it was just money, that we were okay. I watched him breathe. I watched the man I had loved since I was 22 years old struggle to keep his heart beating rhythmically because our son, our only child, had decided he needed a Cadillac more than he needed a father. It took 20 minutes for his color to return. 20 minutes where I sat there and watched him, terrified that I was about to become a widow. And in those 20 minutes, something inside me broke. And then it hardened. The sadness evaporated. The shock dissolved. What was left was something cold and sharp as a diamond. I looked at the computer screen, still glowing with the evidence of Ronald's greed. Then I looked at my husband, slumped in the chair, defeated and broken by the boy he had taught to play baseball. Frank finally opened his eyes. He looked at me, and he must have seen the change in my face. "Peggy," he asked softly, "he almost killed you," I said. My voice was very quiet. "He stole our money. He stole my identity. And today, he almost took my husband." I stood up. I felt tall. I felt dangerous. We aren't calling him Frank. We aren't going to scream. That's what victims do. We aren't victims. Then what are we? Frank asked. I turned off the computer monitor. The screen went black, hiding the ugly numbers. "We are parents," I said, "and it is high time we taught our son a lesson he will never forget." "What do you have in mind?" Frank asked, sitting up a little straighter. "We're going to clean this mess up," I said. "But first, we're going to let him think he got away with it. We're going to dinner." I stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting my scarf. My hands were steady now. The trembling that had taken hold of me when the bank agent read that address had been replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I looked at my reflection. I looked like a grandmother. I looked like a harmless retiree who baked cookies and knitted blankets. That was exactly what I needed to be. "Frank," I called out. "Are you ready?" Frank walked out of the bedroom. He had changed into a fresh polo shirt and his good slacks, but his face still looked gray. The fire that usually lit up his eyes when he talked about fishing or the grandkids was gone. In its place was a dull, heavy sadness. "I don't know if I can do this, Peg," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know if I can look him in the eye and shake his hand knowing he stole from us." I walked over and straightened his collar. I put my hands on his chest, right over his heart, feeling the steady beat beneath the cotton. "You have to," I told him firmly. "If we blow up at him now, he shuts down. He lawyers up. He hides the assets. We lose the leverage. Tonight isn't about fighting, Frank. Tonight is about gathering intelligence. We are spies in our own family." Frank took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, stick to the script." I picked up the phone. I dialed Ronald's number. I forced a smile onto my face, even though no one could see it. It changes the way your voice sounds. It makes you sound happy. "Hey, Mom." Ronald answered on the second ring. He sounded guarded. He always did lately. "Hi, honey." I chirped, letting my voice pitch up a little. Dad and I were just looking at our calendars, and we realized it's been too long. We have some exciting news about our Alaska trip we wanted to share. We were thinking of popping over for a quick dinner. Maybe order some pizza? There was a pause. A long, hesitant silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Do they know? No, they sound too happy. They're just being their usual oblivious selves. Tonight, Ronald stammered. "Connie is, well, the house is a bit of a mess." "Oh, nonsense." I breezed past his excuse. "We don't care about the mess. We just want to see you and the kids. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Love you." I hung up before he could say no. The drive to the suburbs usually took 20 minutes. It felt like an eternity. Frank drove with both hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2, his jaw set so tight I worried he might crack a tooth. We didn't speak. The radio was off. We were soldiers heading into enemy territory. When we turned onto Willow Branch Drive, the sun was just starting to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Ronald lived in a nice neighborhood. Too nice for his salary, I had always thought, but I kept those thoughts to myself. And then we saw it. It was parked right in the center of the driveway, angled slightly, so you couldn't miss it. The 2025 Cadillac Escalade. It was enormous. It was a shimmering, jet-black beast of a vehicle with chrome rims that caught the last of the sunlight. It looked less like a car and more like a tank designed for a warlord. It dwarfed Ronald's old sedan parked on the street. "Look at that," Frank whispered. The disgust in his voice was palpable. "That's our cruise. That's our emergency fund. Sitting right there on 4 wheels. Park behind it," I said. "Block them in." Frank pulled our 10-year-old Honda up behind the shining monster. We got out. The contrast was laughable. Our sensible, dented little SUV next to this $68,000 behemoth. The front door opened before we even reached the porch. Connie stepped out. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater and holding a large glass of white wine. She looked flushed, happy, and expensive. "Peggy!" "Frank!" she called out, waving the wine glass. She didn't come down the steps to hug us. She just stood there, holding court. "Surprise visit." "Huh?" "We just couldn't stay away," I said, walking up the driveway. I stopped deliberately next to the driver's side of the Cadillac. I reached out and ran my hand along the fender. The metal was cool and smooth. My goodness, Connie, what is this? Ronald stepped out of the house behind her. He looked different than his wife. He was wearing a t-shirt that looked damp at the collar. His eyes darted from me to Frank, then to the car, then back to me. He looked like a man waiting for a trapdoor to open. Oh, this. Connie laughed, taking a sip of wine. It's the new Escalade. Ronald finally decided to treat us. The old van was just embarrassing to drive to the club, you know? I looked at Ronald. I locked eyes with him. I kept my face full of wonder and pride, masking the absolute fury burning in my gut. Ronald, it's magnificent, I said, but a Cadillac? These must cost a fortune. How on earth did you manage it? This was the test. This was the moment that would decide everything. Ronald rubbed the back of his neck. He wouldn't look at Frank. He looked at his shoes, then at the sky. Well, you know, Mom, work has been going really well. I got that promotion last month, and they gave me a pretty substantial signing bonus. A bonus? I asked, widening my eyes. Enough for this? Yeah, Ronald said, gaining a little more confidence now that the lie was out. And we had some savings. We decided not to finance it. Interest rates are crazy right now, right? So we paid cash. Clean slate. Owned outright. I felt Frank stiffen beside me. I heard his breath hitch. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. He was standing there, telling the people he stole from that he paid cash for the stolen goods. I knew, technically, he wasn't lying about the cash part in his mind. He didn't finance it in his name. He financed it in mine. To him, it was free money. I stepped closer to him and placed my hands on his arms. I felt his muscles tense up. Paid cash, I repeated slowly. Ronald, I am so proud of you. He blinked, surprised. You are? Yes, I said, putting every ounce of acting skill I possessed into my voice. You know how your father and I feel about debt. We've always told you, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. To see you making such responsible decisions, to see you protecting your family's financial future by not taking out loans, it just makes a mother's heart burst. I watched him squirm. It was physical. He shifted his weight. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. He knew he was drowning in the lie, and I was holding a fire hose of praise right in his face. Yeah, well, learn from the best, right? He mumbled. I turned to Frank. Did you hear that, Frank? He paid cash. No loans. No banks chasing him. Isn't that wonderful? Frank looked at his son. His face was a mask of stone. I prayed he wouldn't crack. I prayed he wouldn't punch Ronald right there in the driveway. That's something, all right, Frank said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. A man who pays his own way. That's a rare thing these days. Ronald. Ronald flinched at his father's tone, but Connie was too absorbed in her wine and her new toy to notice the tension. It has massage seats, Connie bragged, opening the passenger door. And the sound system is incredible. You guys should really upgrade that old Honda. It's looking a little sad next to this. Oh, the Honda is fine for us, I said sweetly. We live simply. We don't need to impress anyone. As long as our bills are paid and nobody is stealing from us, we sleep just fine at night. The air went still. Ronald's head snapped up. Anyway, I clapped my hands together, breaking the tension before it could snap. Let's go inside. I want to hear all about this bonus at work. And wait until we tell you about the cruise. We're going all out. Spending the kids' inheritance. As they say, I walked past them, up the stairs and into the house. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew Ronald was standing there in the driveway, staring at my back, wondering if that last comment was a joke or a threat. We were inside the gates. The Trojan horse had arrived. and they had invited us right in for dinner. Dinner was an exercise in torture. We sat around Ronald's dining table, a sleek, modern glass thing that looked like it belonged in an office lobby rather than a home, eating gourmet pizza that cost $30 a pie. The atmosphere was toxic enough to choke on. Frank sat stiffly in his chair, chewing slowly, his eyes fixed on his plate. He looked like a man trying to dismantle a bomb with his knife and fork. Across from him, Connie was completely checked out. She held a slice of pizza in one hand and her smartphone in the other, her thumb scrolling endlessly through social media. The blue light from the screen illuminated her face, highlighting the boredom in her expression. "So, Connie," Frank tried, his voice sounding rusty, "how is your mother doing? We haven't seen her since the holidays." Connie didn't look up. She just tapped like on a photo and mumbled, "She's fine. Thinking of moving to Florida." "That's nice," Frank said, trying to be polite, trying to be the father-in-law he had always been. "Florida is good for the joints." "Mom," Connie hummed, clearly not listening. She took a bite of pizza, chewed twice, and then turned the phone screen toward Ronald. "Babe, look at this patio set. It would go perfectly with the new landscaping we talked about. It's on sale for $3,000. I nearly dropped my fork. $3,000 for patio furniture. They had just stolen our retirement to buy a car, and now she was shopping for outdoor sofas while we sat at her table. Ronald looked nervous. He glanced at me, then at Frank, then at the phone. Yeah, it's nice, Con. Maybe later though, right? Let's focus on dinner with Mom and Dad." "Whatever," Connie sighed, putting the phone down face up, so she could still see the notifications popping up. "I just don't want to miss the sale." I took a sip of water to wash down the dry lump in my throat. I looked at my son. He was eating fast, shoveling food into his mouth like he was starving or maybe just trying to avoid talking. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that the promotion story couldn't explain. I knew why he was tired. It is exhausting to maintain a lie this big. "So, Ronald," I said, keeping my voice light, "tell us more about this bonus. It must have been substantial to cover a $68,000 car in cash." Ronald choked on his crust. He grabbed his beer and took a long swig. "Yeah, well, sales were up. The quarterly figures were really good." "That is a blessing," I said, because Frank and I were just looking at the bank today, seeing how much everything costs these days. It's a comfort to know you're financially secure. Frank kicked me gently under the table. It was a warning. "Don't push too hard, Peggy." After the plates were cleared, the dynamic shifted. Ronald stood up and wiped his hands on a napkin. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Can you help me look at something in the garage? I think the garage door opener is sticking again." I knew that tone. Every mother knows that tone. It's the "I'm about to ask for something" voice. Frank looked at me. I gave him a tiny nod. "Go ahead. Let's see what he does." "Sure," Frank grunted. He stood up and followed Ronald out through the kitchen door. I was left alone with Connie. The silence stretched out, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator. Peggy," Connie said suddenly, breaking the silence. She was looking at me, with a critical eye scanning my outfit, my hair, my face. "You and Frank really should think about upgrading your place. I mean, that kitchen of yours hasn't been touched since the 90s. I blinked. "I like my kitchen, Connie. It's clean, it works, and it's paid for." She rolled her eyes, picking at her fingernails. "I'm just saying, you guys are sitting on all that retirement money. You're not getting any younger. Why hoard it? You should enjoy it. Or, help out the family more. We're the ones raising your grandkids in this economy." My blood ran cold, sitting on all that money. She had no idea that her husband had already drained the checking account. She had no idea she was driving a stolen car. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care where the money came from, as long as she got to spend it. The entitlement oozed off her like cheap perfume. She didn't see us as people. She saw us as walking ATMs that were malfunctioning because we weren't dispensing cash fast enough. We helped plenty, I said, my voice tight. We paid for the down payment on this house. Connie, remember? That was 10 years ago, she scoffed. Inflation, Peggy, look it up. Before I could say something I would regret, something that would blow our cover, the door from the garage opened. Frank walked in first. His face was a mask of absolute thunder. His lips were pressed into a thin, white line. Ronald followed him, looking sweaty and desperate. Mom, Dad, you guys leaving already? Ronald asked, his voice cracking slightly. Yes, Frank said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. Get your purse, Peggy. I stood up immediately. I didn't ask questions. I knew something had happened in that garage. Wait, Dad, just think about it, okay? Ronald pleaded, stepping in front of Frank. It's for the kids. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. Frank stopped. He turned slowly to look at his son. I gave you my answer, Ronald. No. What's going on? Connie asked, perking up at the drama. Nothing, Ronald snapped at her. Then he turned back to Frank, whispering now, but loud enough for me to hear. Dad, please. It's just $2,000. It's a medical bill. Little Sophie needs braces, and the dental insurance won't cover the down payment. She's in pain, Dad. I stared at my son. Sophie needs braces. Sophie is 7 years old. She still has her baby teeth. She doesn't need braces. And then the math clicked in my head. The car payment was $1,200. The insurance on a luxury SUV for a driver with a record of cash flow problems would be high, probably another $400 or $500 a month. And he was likely overdrawn on his own bank account. He needed $2,000, not for Sophie's teeth, but to keep the repo man away from the Cadillac he had stolen in my name. He was asking us to pay for the theft of our own identity. Sophie is 7. I said, cutting in, she doesn't need braces yet, Ronald. Ronald spun on me, his eyes wild. The dentist said early intervention. You don't know. You're not a doctor. And you're not a man, Frank said. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Connie gasped. Excuse me? You can't talk to him like that in his own house. We're leaving, Frank said. He took my arm, his grip firm. We walked to the front door. Fine, Ronald yelled after us, his desperation turning into anger. Be that way. Hoard your money. See if we visit you in the nursing home. Don't worry about us, Frank said without turning around. We'll be just fine. We walked out into the cool night air. The Cadillac was still there, gleaming under the porch lights, mocking us. We got into our old Honda. Frank started the engine. He didn't put it in gear immediately. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the garage door, where he had just realized his son was beyond saving. He lied to my face, Peg, Frank whispered. He looked me in the eye, man to man, and used his own daughter, my granddaughter, as a prop to hustle me for cash. He's drowning. He's broke. He spent every dime he stole from us, and now he needs a bailout to keep the fraud going. I reached over and covered his hand with mine. I know, Frank. I figured it out. Frank turned to me. There were tears in his eyes, but his jaw was set like granite. The sadness was gone. The hesitation was gone. He said, we're hoarding our money, Frank said, his voice shaking with rage. He thinks he's entitled to everything we worked for. He thinks we're stupid, Peggy. He shifted the car into reverse. Do it, Frank said. Call the lawyer. Call the bank. Burn it down, Peggy. I'm done supporting that family. I want that car gone, and I want him to face the consequences. No more mercy. Are you sure? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Frank said. Drive. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. I saw Ronald standing in the window, watching us leave. He probably thought he had won, that he had just had a fight with his parents, but the secret was still safe. He probably thought he could just steal another few $100s from my account tomorrow to cover his bills. He had no idea that the old, outdated woman he had just insulted was about to bring his entire world crashing down. The dinner was over. Now, it was time for the bill to arrive. The morning after the dinner from hell, I woke up before the alarm. Usually, waking up early means I lie in bed worrying about my hips or whether I remembered to turn off the porch light. But this morning, I felt different. I felt sharp. I felt like I used to feel 40 years ago when I had a deadline at work and a house full of sick kids to manage. I had a job to do. Frank was already up. I could smell the coffee, strong and black. When I walked into the kitchen, he was dressed in his Sunday suit, the navy blue one he wears to weddings and funerals. He was polishing his shoes at the table. "You look sharp," I said, pouring myself a cup. "I'm dressing for business, Peggy," he said, not looking up from the shoe. He scrubbed the leather hard, back and forth. "We're going to see Arthur Henderson, and then we're going to the bank. I want them to see a man who knows what he's doing, not a confused pensioner they can push around. Arthur Henderson has been our family lawyer for 30 years. He wrote our wills. He helped us close on the house. His office smells like old paper and lemon polish, a smell that usually comforts me. Today, it felt like a war room. We sat across from his massive oak desk at 9 a.m. sharp. We didn't waste time with small talk about his grandkids. Frank laid it all out: the unauthorized loan, the digital signature, the stolen debit card funds, and the fake email address. Arthur listened, his bushy gray eyebrows knitting together. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is a mess, Frank." "Peggy," Arthur said, his voice grave. "Identity theft is a felony. Wire fraud is a felony. If we file a police report today, Ronald could be looking at real time. I'm talking years, not months." I felt a pang in my chest, that old motherly instinct trying to protect my cub. But then I remembered Connie's smirk. I remembered Ronald lying about Sophie's braces to squeeze another $2,000 out of his father. "We know," Frank said, his voice steady. "And if we have to go that route, we will. But right now, Arthur, we want to stop the bleeding. We want to secure our assets, and we want that car out of his driveway. If we go to the police, the car sits there as evidence for months while they investigate. We want it gone now." Arthur nodded slowly. "All right, here is the situation. Since the loan is in your name, Peggy, you are the legal borrower. The bank thinks you own that car. That puts you in a powerful position regarding possession." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You have the right to voluntary surrender." Arthur explained. "You can call the lender and tell them you cannot or will not make the payments and that you are surrendering the collateral. You tell them exactly where the vehicle is, and they will send a recovery agent to pick it up immediately. It's faster than a court order." "Do it," Frank said. "Draft the letter. Make the call." "It will hit your credit score initially," Arthur warned. "A repossession looks bad." "My credit is already ruined," I said, thinking of the $68,000 of debt sitting on my report. "I don't care about the score right now. I care about the principle. I want that car gone." Arthur picked up his phone. We spent the next hour authorizing the surrender. I had to give them the location: 18 Willow Branch Drive. I had to confirm that the keys were likely with the unauthorized driver. The bank representative on the phone sounded confused at first, but when Arthur used his lawyer voice and mentioned potential fraud litigation, they moved fast. They promised a recovery agent would be assigned within 48 hours. Leaving Arthur's office felt like dropping a heavy weight, only to pick up a shield. Our next stop was the bank branch. Our bank. Not the website, not the app. The brick-and-mortar building where we knew the manager, Mrs. Gable. Walking in, there felt like walking into an emergency room. I marched straight to Mrs. Gable's desk. She smiled when she saw us, but her smile faltered when she saw Frank's face. "Mr. and Mrs. Butler, is everything all right?" "No, Janet," I said, "we have had a security breach. A severe one. We need to lock everything down." Now, we spent 2 hours in that cubicle. It was exhausting, tedious work. We closed the checking account that Ronald had access to. We opened new ones with new account numbers. I had Janet remove my email address from the system entirely and replace it with a new, secure one that Frank created on his phone right there. We set up two-factor authentication, meaning nobody could log in without a code sent to Frank's cell phone. Then came the credit bureaus. We called Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. We placed a credit freeze on both of our Social Security numbers. It meant no one, not even us, could take out a loan, open a credit card, or buy a car in our names without a special PIN number. "He's locked out," Frank said as we walked out of the bank into the bright midday sun. "He can't get a dime. If he tries to swipe that debit card number he stole at the gas station today, it will decline. If he tries to apply for a loan to pay off the car, it will be blocked." "He's going to panic," I said. "Good," Frank replied. "Let him panic." We went home and ate a silent lunch of sandwiches. I felt drained, but accomplished. We had built a fortress around what was left of our life. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with my iPad, the one I had wiped clean and reset with a new passcode Ronald would never guess. I logged into Facebook. I don't post much, mostly just pictures of my garden or the occasional recipe. But I like to see what the neighbors are doing. I was scrolling through the feed when a post caught my eye. It was from Linda, a woman who lives 2 doors down from Ronald and Connie. She's a nice woman, a bit of a gossip, always posting photos of her cats and neighborhood gatherings. There was a picture of a glittery invitation card. The caption read, "So excited for the block party this Saturday. Connie and Ronald are hosting a success celebration to toast Ronald's big promotion and show off their new wheels, champagne and caviar at 2 p.m. Hashtag blessed, hashtag new Cadillac, hashtag good neighbors." I stared at the screen. My mouth actually fell open. A success celebration. They were throwing a party to celebrate a promotion that didn't exist, to show off a car they stole, paid for with money they embezzled from his retired parents. And they were serving champagne and caviar. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was dark and sharp. "Frank," I yelled. "Frank, come look at this." Frank came out to the porch, wiping grease from his hands. He had been angrily cleaning the lawnmower. He looked at the iPad screen. He read the post twice. "Champagne and caviar," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "They have no shame. No shame at all." "Saturday at 2 p.m., I said, tapping the screen. "All the neighbors will be there. Linda, the Johnsons, probably some of Ronald's work friends." Frank looked at me. He saw the look in my eye. It was the same look I had when I found out the contractor was trying to overcharge us for the roof. "The repo order is already in the system, Peggy," Frank said. "The bank said 48 hours. That puts us right at Saturday." "Exactly," I said. I picked up my phone. "I'm calling the repossession agency directly. Arthur gave me the dispatch number." "What are you going to do?" Frank asked. "I'm going to make sure the driver doesn't come at 8 a.m. when everyone is asleep," I said, dialing the number. "I'm going to tell them that the vehicle will be accessible, unlocked, and parked in the driveway specifically between the hours of 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. You want them to take it during the party? Frank asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. If Connie wants to show off her new car to the neighborhood, I said, listening to the phone ring, I think we should help her. Let's show everyone exactly who paid for it. Hello, dispatch. I said into the phone, my voice clear and authoritative. This is Peggy Butler. I have an update regarding the voluntary surrender order for the 2025 Cadillac. I have the exact time and location where the recovery will be most successful. I looked at Frank and winked. The net was closed. Now, we just had to wait for the catch. Saturday afternoon arrived with a cloudless blue sky, the kind of perfect weather you pray for when you're hosting a barbecue. For Frank and me, parked 2 blocks away in the shadow of a large oak tree, the weather felt like a spotlight. We had the windows down in our Honda, listening to the faint thump of bass coming from Willow Branch Drive. It's 1:45, Frank said, checking his watch. The recovery agent said between 2 and 3. He'll be there, I said, my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. Arthur said this company is efficient. We had been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching cars turn onto Ronald Street. We saw Linda's sedan. We saw the Johnsons' minivan. We saw a few cars I didn't recognize, probably Ronald's colleagues, the ones he had lied to about his big bonus. Drive slowly past the house. I told Frank, I want to see the setup. Frank eased the car into gear, and we rolled down the street, keeping our speed to a crawl. As we approached number 18, the scene unfolded like a play. The driveway was the stage, and the black Cadillac Escalade was the star. Ronald had washed and waxed it until it looked like a mirror. It was parked diagonally across the driveway, blocking everything else, demanding attention. The trunk was open, revealing a cooler full of ice and expensive beer. And there was Connie. She was wearing a white jumpsuit and gold sandals, holding a glass of champagne. She was leaning against the front grille of the Cadillac, posing while Linda took a picture with her phone. I could hear her laughter from the street. It was loud, shrill, and full of triumph. Look at this beast. Connie was shouting to a group of women. It drives like a dream. Ronald just insisted we pay cash for it. He said, nothing but the best for my girls. Frank gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. She's standing on a crime scene acting like she owns the place. We drove past without waving. They were too busy admiring their stolen trophy to notice 2 pensioners in a 10-year-old Honda creeping by. We circled the block and returned to our parking spot under the oak tree. Now we wait, I said, at exactly 2:05 p.m. The sound of the party was interrupted by the heavy rumble of a diesel engine. I watched in the side mirror as a massive flatbed tow truck turned the corner. It was bright yellow, with Premier Recovery stenciled on the side in black letters. It looked like a predator entering a clearing. It moved with purpose, the air brakes hissing as it slowed down. Here we go, Frank whispered. The truck didn't hesitate. The driver, a burly man in a neon vest, swung the truck wide and then began backing up directly into Ronald's driveway. The harsh beep, beep, beep of the reverse alarm cut through the music like a knife. We put the Honda in gear and followed the truck, pulling up to the curb right in front of the house just as the chaos began. The music stopped. The chatter died. Connie was standing by the driver's side door of the Cadillac, her mouth open. She looked from the massive tow truck to the driver, who was already hopping out of the cab with a clipboard in his hand. Excuse me. Connie screamed, stepping forward. Excuse me. You are blocking my driveway. We have guests. The driver didn't even look up from his paperwork. He walked straight to the Cadillac's windshield and checked the VIN number against his sheet. Hey! Ronald came running out of the garage, a burger flipper still in his hand. He looked pale. What's going on? You can't park that thing here. The driver looked at Ronald, bored and professional. I'm not parking. I'm recovering the collateral. The what? Connie shrieked. She laughed nervously, looking around at the neighbors who had all gone silent, their drinks frozen halfway to their mouths. This is a mistake. There must be some mistake. We paid for this car. It's fully paid off. The driver finally looked at her. He had a look I recognized, the look of a man who has heard every lie in the book. Ma'am, please step away from the vehicle, he said calmly. He reached for the chains on the back of his truck. No, Connie yelled. She actually threw her arms out, blocking the car door. You are not touching my car. Ronald, tell him. Tell him we paid cash. Ronald was frozen. He saw the tow truck. He saw the neighbors watching. And then he saw us. Frank and I stepped out of our car. I smoothed my skirt. Frank adjusted his jacket. We walked up the driveway, past the stunned neighbors. Linda gasped when she saw me. Mom. Ronald croaked. His eyes were wide with terror. He looked like a trapped animal. Mom, what are you doing here? Connie spun around. Peggy, thank God. Tell this idiot to leave. He's trying to tow the new car. I didn't look at Connie. I walked right up to the tow truck driver. Good afternoon, I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the crowd. I believe you are looking for me. I am Peggy Butler. The driver looked at his clipboard, then at me. He nodded respectfully. Mrs. Butler, I have the voluntary surrender order here, authorized by you. Is this the vehicle? Yes, I said. This is the vehicle. The silence that fell over that driveway was heavier than the tow truck. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the ice melting in the cooler. Connie's face went white. She looked at the driver, then at me, then at Ronald. What is he talking about? Voluntary surrender? Peggy, tell him it's Ronald's car. It's not Ronald's car, Connie, I said. I didn't shout. I spoke with the calm authority of a mother who is done cleaning up messes. Ronald couldn't buy this car. Ronald has bad credit. So Ronald bought this car using my name, my social security number, my credit history. I turned to look at the neighbors. I saw Linda covering her mouth. I saw Ronald's boss frowning. He stole my identity, I said, letting the words hang there. And he stole the down payment from his father's retirement account. Mom, stop. Ronald hissed, rushing toward me. He tried to grab my arm, but Frank stepped in between us. Frank didn't push him. He just stood there, a wall of disappointment that Ronald couldn't cross. Don't touch her, Frank said. His voice was low, dangerous. But you said you paid cash. Connie stammered, turning on her husband. You told me you got a bonus. You told everyone. He lied. I said simply. He lied to you. He lied to us. And he lied to the bank. But the bank doesn't like being lied to, Connie. And neither do I. I turned back to the driver. Take it. Mom, please. Ronald was crying now, actual tears streaming down his face as his social standing disintegrated in front of everyone he wanted to impress. Please don't do this. I'll pay you back. I swear. Just let me keep it for today. Don't humiliate me like this. You humiliated yourself, Ronald. I said, you threw a party to celebrate a theft. You invited the whole neighborhood to watch you spend money that wasn't yours. I'm just balancing the books. The driver didn't wait for permission from Ronald. He hooked the chains onto the front axle of the Cadillac. The winch whined loudly, drowning out Ronald's sobbing. Slowly, painfully, the massive black SUV was dragged up onto the flatbed. The tires screeched against the asphalt, leaving black marks on the driveway, a permanent scar to remember this day by. The success celebration banner that was taped to the garage door fluttered in the wind, looking pathetic. Connie wasn't screaming anymore. She was staring at the ground. realizing that her white jumpsuit, her champagne, and her bragging were all built on a foundation of fraud that had just collapsed. As the truck secured the car, and the driver hopped back into the cab, I looked at my son one last time. "It's over, Ronald," I said. "The car is gone. The accounts are closed. And the police report is sitting on our lawyer's desk. You have a choice to make about what kind of man you want to be from now on. But you won't be making it on our dime." Frank put his hand on my back. "Let's go, Peggy." We walked back to our Honda. The tow truck roared to life and pulled away, carrying the symbol of their greed down the street. The neighbors didn't say a word. They just parted to let us through, looking at us with a mixture of shock and newfound respect. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The driveway was empty. The party was dead. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The silence left behind by a tow truck is heavier than you might expect. When that yellow flatbed turned the corner, carrying the Cadillac away like a dead beetle, the noise of the neighborhood didn't just return. It crept back in, hesitant and awkward. I watched from the sidewalk as the guests at the success party scattered like ants when you kick the hill. Linda grabbed her casserole dish and practically ran to her car without saying goodbye. The men who worked with Ronald muttered excuses about needing to beat traffic, keeping their eyes on the pavement. Within 5 minutes, the driveway that had been full of laughter and bragging was empty, save for the oil stain the tow truck had left behind. And Connie, she was sitting on the front steps, her face buried in her hands. She was sobbing, her shoulders shaking violently. A younger, more naive version of me might have gone to comfort her. I might have thought, "She's heartbroken. She's sorry." But I am not naive anymore. I watched her closely. She wasn't crying because she felt guilty about spending our money. She wasn't crying because she had participated in a crime against her husband's parents. She was crying because the neighbors had seen her fail. She was crying because she had been stripped of her status symbol in front of the very people she tried so desperately to impress. It was the tears of a child who got caught stealing candy, not an adult seeking redemption. Frank and I didn't stay to watch the show. We drove home in silence. But it wasn't the heavy, fearful silence of the last few weeks. It was the calm silence of a job well done. We knew it wasn't over, though. We knew Sunday was coming. Ronald didn't call that night. He didn't text. I imagine the fight inside that house was legendary. But the next morning, just as we were finishing breakfast, we heard tires screech in our driveway. Frank didn't flinch. He just set his coffee cup down on the saucer. "He's here," Frank said. "Remember the plan. Peggy, let him talk first." The front door flew open. Ronald didn't knock. He stormed into the kitchen, his face a blotchy red mess of sleeplessness and rage. He looked disheveled, wearing the same clothes he had on yesterday, looking like a man who had spent the night pacing. "Are you happy?" he screamed. He slammed his hand on the kitchen island, making the toaster rattle. "Are you satisfied? You humiliated us. You humiliated me in front of my boss, Mom. In front of the whole neighborhood." I stayed seated. I buttered my toast calmly. "Good morning, Ronald. Most people knock before entering." "Don't give me that," he shouted, pacing the small kitchen floor. "You could have called me. You could have warned me. But no, you had to stage a scene. You had to send a tow truck during the party? That was vicious, Mom. That was cruel." He was pointing a finger at me, his eyes wild. "Connie is a wreck. She won't come out of the bedroom. My boss asked me if I'm having financial trouble. Do you know what that does to my career? You might have just cost me my job. How could you do this to your own family?" He was panting now, waiting for me to apologize. He was waiting for the mother who used to fix his scraped knees to stand up and say, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I went too far." But that mother was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who knew exactly what her son was capable of. Frank stood up. He didn't stand up fast. He stood up slowly, using the table for support, unfolding his height until he loomed over the kitchen table. He looked at Ronald with eyes that were cold and hard as flint. "You want to talk about cruelty, Ronald?" Frank asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a rumble in it that stopped Ronald's pacing. "Cruelty is looking your father in the eye and lying about a bonus while you steal his retirement. Cruelty is using your mother's good name to buy a toy you can't afford." "It was a loan," Ronald argued, though his voice wavered slightly. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed a bridge loan until the commission checks cleared. I was handling it." "You weren't handling anything," Frank said. He reached down to the empty chair beside him and picked up a thick manila folder. He dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is that?" Ronald asked, eyeing the folder. "That," Frank said, "is not the car. We dealt with the car yesterday. That folder contains the evidence of what you did to your mother's checking account." Ronald's face went from red to a sickly pale color. He stopped moving. Frank opened the folder. He laid out the papers one by one, like he was dealing a hand of cards. "Here is the log where someone changed the password on our bank account," Frank said, pointing to a sheet of paper. "Here is the fake email address created on the same day you fixed your mother's iPad. And here—" Frank slapped a stack of highlighted bank statements onto the wood. "Here are 3 pages of withdrawals. Gas stations, liquor stores, movie theaters, restaurants. $5,420, Ronald." Frank looked up, locking eyes with his son. "You didn't just buy a car. You were living off us. You were filling your tank and buying your booze with the money your mother and I saved for our old age. That isn't a bridge loan. That is theft. That is wire fraud. That is elder abuse." The room went dead silent. The refrigerator hummed. A bird chirped outside. Ronald looked at the papers, unable to look away. He knew. There was no spinning this. There was no "Sophie needs braces" lie that could cover 3 pages of liquor store charges. Ronald started, his voice a whisper. "I didn't realize it was that much." "You didn't care?" I said. "You felt entitled to it." Frank leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "So here is where we stand. I spoke to Mr. Henderson, our lawyer. He has the police report drafted. It's sitting on his desk right now. Ronald, all I have to do is call him and say go." Ronald's knees seemed to give out. He slumped into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "Dad, you can't. I'll go to jail. I'll lose the house. Connie will leave me. You should have thought about that before you stole my identity." I said, "We are giving you one choice," Frank said, cutting through Ronald's pity party. "Just one. And you are going to decide right now." Frank pulled a document out of the back of the folder. It was a formal contract Arthur Henderson had drawn up. It was simple, brutal, and binding. "Option A," Frank said. "We make the call. The police come here, arrest you for identity theft and credit card fraud. You go to prison. You get a felony record. We let the justice system handle you." Ronald flinched. "Option B," Frank continued, sliding the paper across the table and clicking a pen. "You sign this. This is a promissory note and restraining agreement. It acknowledges that you owe us $5,420. It sets up a payment plan of $500 a month, automatically deducted from your paycheck, with 5% interest." "But that's not all," I added. Frank nodded. "The agreement also states that you are never, and I mean never, to ask us for money again. Not for a car, not for a house, not for braces. If you miss one payment, or if you try to open another account in our names, we file the police report immediately. The statute of limitations gives us years to hold this over your head. Ronald looked at the paper. His hands were shaking. He looked up at us, his eyes wet. Dad, $500 a month? We're broke without the bonus. Connie spends so much. Then tell Connie to get a job, Frank barked. Sell the patio furniture. Sell the big TV. I don't care how you do it, but you will pay us back. And one more thing, I said, my voice soft but firm. You don't come over here anymore unless you are invited. I am done being your doormat, Ronald. You broke our trust. You don't get to walk in here and eat my food and act like nothing happened. You lost that privilege. Ronald looked at the pen. He looked at the contract. He looked at his father, who stood like a statue of judgment. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that his parents were not just resources to be used. We were people, and we were stronger than him. Okay, Ronald whispered. Okay, I'll sign. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely form the letters. He signed his name at the bottom of the page. It wasn't the signature of a proud man. It was the signature of a defeated one. Frank took the paper, checked the signature, and put it back in the folder. He closed it with a snap. The first payment is due on the 1st of the month. Frank said, Now get out of my house. Ronald stood up. He looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe, I love you. Maybe, I'm sorry. But the words died in his throat. He turned and walked out the door. His shoulders slumped. A smaller man than the one who had stormed in. When the door clicked shut, Frank let out a long, heavy breath and sat down. He reached across the table and took my hand. We did it, Peg, he said quietly. Yes, I said, squeezing his rough, warm hand. We did. We got our lives back. It wasn't a happy ending. No parent wants to threaten their child with prison. But as I looked at that folder, I knew we had done the right thing. We had stopped the bleeding. We had taught him the lesson he should have learned 20 years ago. And most importantly, we were safe. The 1st of the month used to be just another day on the calendar. Now, it is a day of vindication. It has been 3 months since the tow truck hauled that black Cadillac out of Ronald's driveway. 3 months since Frank slammed that folder on the table and forced our son to become a man. Every month, on the 1st, I check my bank app. And every month, like clockwork, there it is, a deposit of $500. It's labeled restitution. Seeing that money hit the account doesn't make me jump for joy. It's not about the cash. $500 doesn't change our lifestyle, but it changes my sleep. That deposit tells me that for the first time in years, Ronald is taking responsibility. He is sweating for that money. He is budgeting for it. He is finally understanding the value of $1 because he has to pay it back to the people he stole it from. Things are different now. The phone doesn't ring as often. We don't have Sunday dinners at Ronald's house anymore. The silence between our houses is thick, and sometimes late at night, it aches a little. No mother wants to be estranged from her only child. I miss the idea of the happy family I thought we had. But then I remember the lies. I remember the stolen debit card. And I realized that the happy family was just a performance paid for by my retirement fund. The silence we have now isn't empty. It's peaceful. And peace is exactly what we packed our bags for. I took a deep breath of air, so crisp it felt like drinking ice water. I wasn't standing in my kitchen looking at bills. I was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, sitting on a private balcony on the 10th deck of a cruise ship, drifting slowly through Glacier Bay, Alaska. Look at that blue, Frank said softly from the chair next to me. He was pointing at the massive wall of ice in the distance. It wasn't just white. It was a deep electric blue that looked like it was glowing from the inside. The ship's engines were cut low, just a gentle hum beneath our feet. The water was like black glass, reflecting the mountains and the gray sky. Frank looked good. The gray pallor that had hung over him during the Cadillac crisis, as we called it, was gone. His cheeks were pink from the cold wind. He was holding a glass of red wine in one hand and my hand in the other. He wasn't shaking. His blood pressure was down. He was the Frank I married again, steady, calm, and present. "It's beautiful," I said, leaning my head back against the chair. "It's worth every penny." "It is," Frank agreed. He took a sip of wine. "And the best part is, we're paying for it with our own money. Nobody is siphoning off the top." We watched a chunk of ice break off the glacier and crash into the water with a sound like a cannon shot. It was powerful and majestic. "Have you heard from him?" Frank asked after a while. He didn't say the name, but I knew who he meant. He texted me yesterday. I admitted, just said, "Payment sent," and a picture of Sophie at her soccer game. "That's it. That's it," I said. No asking for gas money. No stories about bonuses. Just the facts. Frank nodded slowly. "Good. That's good. Connie got a job." I added, "Linda told me she's working part-time at a boutique in the mall." Apparently, they needed the extra income to cover the loan payments to us. Frank let out a short, dry laugh. "Imagine that. Connie working. Maybe there is hope for them. Yet." We sat there for a long time, watching the seals play on the ice floes. It felt like we had survived a storm. Not a storm of wind and rain, but a storm of betrayal. We had steered our little ship through the rocks, and now we were in open water. "Do you think we were too hard on him?" Frank asked suddenly. The question hung in the cold air. It's the question that haunts every parent who has ever had to practice tough love. I turned to look at my husband. I saw the doubt in his eyes. The father who just wanted to protect his boy. "No," I said firmly. "Frank, look at where we are. Look at where he is. If we hadn't stopped him, he would have drained us dry. He would have spent every cent we had, and when we were broke and sick, he wouldn't have been able to help us because he would still be drowning in his own greed. We didn't hurt him, Frank. We saved him. And we saved ourselves." Frank squeezed my hand. "You're right, Peg. You're always right." "Not always," I smiled. "But about this?" "Yes. We gave him the greatest gift a parent can give an adult child. Consequences." Frank lifted his glass. "To consequences. To consequences," I said, clinking my glass against his. "And to Alaska." We sat there until the sun began to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I looked at Frank, closing his eyes and listening to the wind. "We have maybe 15, 20 good years left. I intend to spend them looking at glaciers, planting my garden, and sleeping soundly at night." I turned away from the view for a moment, and if I could look you right in the eye, I would tell you this. We spend our whole lives protecting our children. We hold their hands when they cross the street. We catch them when they fall off their bikes. We shield them from the mean kids at school. It is our instinct to be the safety net. But there comes a time when the safety net becomes a hammock. There comes a time when our help isn't helping anymore. It's enabling. It is a terrible thing to realize that the person you gave life to is the person threatening your livelihood. It breaks your heart, but you cannot set yourself on fire just to keep your children warm. You have earned your peace. You have earned your security. And sometimes the bravest, hardest thing you can do is stand up to the people you love and say, "No more. You are not a bad mother for protecting your future. You are not a bad grandmother for demanding respect. You are a person who deserves to enjoy the golden years you worked 50 years to build." Frank stirred beside me. "Getting chilly, Peg. Want to go inside? I think they're serving crab legs at the buffet tonight." Crab legs sound perfect, I said. I stood up and helped Frank out of his chair. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close to keep the wind off. We stood there for one last second, a team of two, unbroken and unbowed. The Cadillac is gone. The debt is being paid. And my husband is holding my hand. This is what victory looks like. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.